$25,000 separates two completely different lives. Not because the money itself is magical, because the psychology changes. I've watched this threshold for 7 decades, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, most people never cross it. They spend their entire working lives on the wrong side of this line, and they die there. Not because they're stupid, not because they're unlucky, because they fundamentally misunderstand what $25,000 represents. This isn't your emergency fund. This isn't 3 months of expenses sitting in a savings account waiting for your car to break down. That's survival thinking, and survival thinking keeps you trapped. $25,000 is the first real capital you've ever had in your life. It's the moment you stop being a consumer and become an investor. It's the moment your money starts working harder than you do. And most critically, it's the moment your brain stops screaming at you to spend everything you earn. Here's what nobody tells you. The difference between $25,000 and zero isn't $25,000. It's the difference between two entirely different operating systems for how you think about money, work, and freedom. One system keeps you on a treadmill until you're 70. The other system builds momentum that eventually lets you step off whenever you choose. And the brutal truth is this: if you haven't reached $25,000 by the time you're 40, you're not just behind. You're operating with faulty software that needs complete reinstallation. I'm going to explain exactly why this threshold changes everything, why the mathematics of compound interest rank among the most powerful forces on earth, why your brain fights you every step of the way to this point, and why everything you think you know about building wealth is probably wrong. Not because someone lied to you, but because conventional advice was designed for people who already have capital, not for people trying to accumulate their first meaningful chunk. Let me tell you who you are, because I've met 10,000 people just like you. You're 47 years old, maybe 52. You earn $63,000 a year, maybe 75. You've been working for 25 years. You're not lazy. You've never been lazy. You show up, you do the work, you pay your bills mostly on time. You got maybe $8,000 in savings, maybe 12 if you've been disciplined. You got a 401k with $37,000 that you barely understand and never think about except when the statement arrives quarterly and makes you vaguely anxious. And you're tired. Not physically tired, though you are that too. Mentally tired. Tired of the gap between what you were told would happen and what actually happened. You were told that if you got a decent job, worked hard, and lived reasonably, you'd be secure. You'd own a home. You'd retire comfortably. Your kids would have it better than you did. Instead, you live paycheck to paycheck, despite earning more than your parents ever dreamed of. You've got a car payment, a mortgage or rent that takes 40% of your take-home, credit cards with balances that never quite reach zero. You're doing everything right according to the script you were given, and somehow you're still losing ground. Here's the part that really eats at you. You know people earning less than you who seem more secure. And you know people earning more than you who are even more stressed about money than you are, which means this isn't actually about your salary. There's something else happening that nobody explained to you. You feel behind. You're watching colleagues talk about their investment portfolios while you're trying to figure out how to pay for your daughter's college without destroying yourself financially. You're seeing younger people at work who understand cryptocurrency and index funds and tax-advantaged accounts, speaking a language you never quite learned. You resent that you started late or that you made mistakes in your 20s and 30s that you're still paying for now. And here's what keeps you up at night. You're running out of time. You can feel it. Another decade disappears and suddenly you're 60 and then 65, and then you're that 72-year-old guy still working at Home Depot because Social Security isn't enough and your kids can't help because they're struggling too. You can see that future clearly, and it terrifies you. So you read articles about financial independence. You watch YouTube videos about investing. You get motivated for 3 weeks. Save aggressively. Feel good about yourself. Then the dishwasher breaks. Then your son needs braces. Then your spouse wants to take one vacation because you've been working so hard and life is short. And that 3 weeks of discipline evaporates. The savings account gets drained again. You're back to zero. Again. The worst part, you're smart enough to know what you should be doing. You understand that compound interest exists. You know you should be investing regularly. You know you should have 6 months of expenses saved. You know you shouldn't carry credit card debt. You know all of this intellectually. But somehow, month after month, year after year, you can't make yourself do it consistently. And conventional financial advice makes it worse. Some 29-year-old finance bro tells you to just invest 15% of your income, like you got got 15% lying around. Some blogger who inherited $200,000 from their grandparents explains their path to financial independence while casually mentioning they started with a massive head start. Some advisor wants to discuss your asset allocation when you haven't even figured out how to save the assets in the first place. Nobody's talking to you. Nobody's addressing your actual situation, the situation where you're starting late or starting over, where you can't go back and fix your 20s, where you've got current obligations you can't just ignore, where you need a framework that accounts for the fact that you're already exhausted and your margin for error is basically zero. You need to understand something. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility to fix it. Your brain is working against you, not metaphorically, literally. The same neural wiring that kept your ancestors alive on the savannah is systematically destroying your financial future. And until you understand this, you'll keep making the same mistakes regardless of how much financial information you consume. Let me explain what's actually happening in your head. Every human brain operates on firmware that was installed 50,000 years ago. Back then, if you found calories, you consumed them immediately because food was scarce and you might not find more tomorrow. If you saw your neighbor with more resources, you competed because resources determine survival and reproduction. If you had something and someone tried to take it away, you fought with disproportionate intensity because loss meant death. These instincts made perfect sense in that environment. They kept you alive long enough to reproduce, but you're not living in that environment anymore. You're living in an economy where delayed gratification determines security, where comparison to others drives destructive decisions, and where the pain of giving up current consumption overwhelms rational consideration of future benefits. Social proof tendency. This is the instinct that makes you look at what others are doing and assume it must be correct. When your colleague shows up in a new truck, your brain registers this as important social information. Someone in your peer group has access to resources that you don't. This triggers anxiety. You don't think maybe they made a terrible financial decision, or you think I need to keep up, so you lease a vehicle you can't afford, not because you need it, because your brain is screaming that you're falling behind in the social hierarchy. And that lease payment, $450 a month, $5,400 a year, is exactly the difference between staying stuck at $8,000 in savings forever and reaching $25,000 in 4 years. But you can't see that trade-off clearly because social proof tendency has hijacked your decision-making. You're literally watching your financial future evaporate in real time, and it feels correct because other people are doing the same thing. Envy and jealousy tendency. This is different from social proof. Social proof makes you copy behaviors. Envy makes you sabotage yourself out of spite. You're not just trying to keep up, you're punishing yourself for falling behind. I've watched people earning 6 figures live paycheck to paycheck because their neighbors bought a boat. The boat triggered envy, so they bought a camper they didn't want and couldn't afford, not because camping appealed to them. Because they couldn't stand that someone else had a leisure toy and they didn't. That camper payment, another $600 monthly, is $7,200 annually. That's capital. That's investment money. That's compound interest opportunity. Gone, burned, sacrificed to envy, deprival super reaction tendency. This is the big one. This is why you can't save consistently even when you know you should. The pain of giving up current spending feels approximately 4 times as intense as the pleasure of future security. Your brain treats every dollar you save as losing that dollar, not as investing it or deploying it strategically, as losing it. So saving $500 this month registers in your nervous system as a $500 loss, while the abstract concept of having $200,000 in 20 years barely registers at all because it's not concrete and it's not immediate. This is why budgeting fails. You're constantly asking your brain to accept pain now for abstract benefits later, and your brain is designed to avoid pain and pursue pleasure in the present moment. You lose every single time unless you change the game entirely. Availability bias. Whatever happened recently dominates your risk assessment. Your friend tells you about making 15% returns in cryptocurrency. That vivid story overwrites every boring academic study about long-term index investing. So you abandon your systematic approach to chase returns you saw someone else achieve, and you lose money. Not because crypto is inherently bad, but because you bought high after it already ran up. And you'll sell low when it crashes because panic is also subject to availability bias. Or the inverse happens. The market drops 20%. You see scary headlines. Your account balance is down $15,000 on paper. This vivid, immediate loss overwhelms your understanding that markets recover. So you sell, converting a temporary decline into a permanent loss. Then you miss the recovery. Then you buy back in higher. This pattern, selling low and buying high driven by availability bias, has destroyed more wealth than every stock market crash in history combined. Authority misinfluence tendency. You trust the financial advisor because they seem professional and they've got credentials on the wall. You don't ask how they're compensated. You don't realize they make money by selling you products that generate fees, not by optimizing your outcomes. So they put you in expensive, actively managed mutual funds charging 1.25% annually, when index funds charging 0.03% would perform better. That 1.22% difference on $50,000 is $610 this year. It's $7,000 over 10 years. It's $18,000 over 20 years. Your advisor just stole $18,000 from your retirement by giving you advice that served their interests rather than yours. But you trusted the authority figure instead of checking the incentive structure. Now here's what makes this catastrophic. These tendencies don't operate independently. They combine. During a market bubble, you've got social proof showing you that everyone is making money, envy making you feel like a fool for missing out, availability bias convincing you that recent returns will continue forever, and authority figures on television validating the whole thing. Your brain is getting hit from 4 directions simultaneously. You don't stand a chance. This is called a Lollapalooza effect. Multiple psychological tendencies reinforcing each other to produce decision-making errors far more severe than any single tendency could create. And the same thing happens in reverse during crashes. Social proof shows panic. Envy makes you angry that others got out before you. Availability bias makes recent losses feel like permanent reality, and authority figures are screaming about financial apocalypse. Understanding this doesn't make you immune, but it makes you aware. You can recognize when you're entering a dangerous decision-making environment. You can identify which specific tendency is pushing you toward a bad choice, and you can implement predetermined rules that protect you from yourself during moments when your psychology is working against your interests. The path to $25,000 isn't about intelligence. It's about protecting yourself from predictable stupidity. Charlie Munger had a phrase, invert, always invert. Instead of asking, how do I get rich, ask, what guarantees I'll stay poor? Instead of seeking brilliant strategies, identify stupid mistakes and systematically avoid them. This changes everything, because avoiding disaster is easier than achieving brilliance. And over sufficient time, avoiding disaster produces results indistinguishable from brilliance. Let me show you the guaranteed ways to never reach $25,000. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, understand that you're choosing poverty, not because of circumstances, because of behavior, carrying high-interest debt while saving. This is mathematical insanity that millions of people practice daily. You've got $4,000 in credit card debt at 18% interest. You're paying roughly $60 monthly in interest charges, $720 annually. You're also putting $100 monthly into savings, earning 1%, gaining $1 a month or $12 annually. You're paying $720 to borrow money while earning $12 to save it. Net cost, $708 yearly. This is lighting cash on fire while congratulating yourself for saving. You're not saving. You're burning $708 annually, which over 10 years is $7,080 you've incinerated. The correct move is obvious. Stop saving temporarily, eliminate the debt, then redirect both the previous debt payment and the previous savings into actual wealth building. But deprival super-reaction tendency makes this psychologically impossible for most people. Stopping your savings contributions feels like moving backwards even though it's the only rational choice. Lifestyle inflation synchronized with income growth. You earn $60,000. You save 6%, which is $3,600 annually. You get a raise to $66,000. You increase your saving to 6% of the new income, which is $3,960. You increased your savings by $360. You also increased your spending by $5,640. This pattern continues for 30 years. You go from $60,000 to $110,000 over your career. Your savings rate stays constant around 6%, and you never accumulate meaningful capital because you spent every dollar of every raise adjusting your lifestyle upward. Meanwhile, your colleague who kept lifestyle constant at the $60,000 level is saving $24,000 annually by the end of that same 30-year period. Your colleague retires with $2 million. You retire with $400,000. Identical careers, identical raises, catastrophically different outcomes. The difference: one person inflated lifestyle proportionally, the other didn't, chasing performance. You've got a systematic investment approach. You're putting $400 monthly into a total market index fund. It's boring. It's working. Then you hear about someone making 30% in tech stocks. Your returns are only 9%. You feel like an idiot. So you sell your boring index fund and buy individual tech stocks. The tech stocks are up 30% because they already ran up. You're buying high. Then the sector corrects. You're down 15%. You panic. You sell. You just converted your systematic 9% annual return into a realized 15% loss. Then the market recovers and your original index fund is up another 12%. You missed it because you were chasing performance. This pattern, abandoning what works when it temporarily underperforms, chasing what's hot after it's already expensive, selling in panic during corrections, produces negative returns in an environment where the market delivers positive returns. You're literally losing money in a winning game by trying to play it better, making financial decisions based on social comparison. Your neighbor earns $75,000. You earn $75,000. Your neighbor buys a $35,000 car. You feel pressure to maintain comparable lifestyle, so you buy a $35,000 car. Neither of you can afford it. What you don't know, your neighbor inherited $150,000 and has no student debt. You inherited nothing and you've got $40,000 in student loans. Your financial situations are completely different despite identical incomes, but you made your decision based on comparison rather than on your actual circumstances. That car payment is $650 monthly. That's $7,800 annually. That's the difference between reaching $25,000 in 4 years versus never reaching it at all. You destroyed your financial future trying to match someone playing an entirely different game, tolerating toxic financial relationships. You've got a business partner who's unreliable. They don't contribute equally. You're carrying them, but you've known them for 20 years. You can't bring yourself to end it. So you spend a decade making $60,000 instead of $80,000 because you're splitting revenue with someone who isn't pulling their weight. That $20,000 annual opportunity cost is $200,000 over 10 years. That's the down payment on financial independence. That's the capital that would have transformed your life. Gone. Sacrificed because you couldn't have an uncomfortable conversation, or you've got a spouse who sabotages every savings attempt. They agree to budget discipline. Then they spend, they agree again, they spend again. You're not partners, you're adversaries, and this relationship is costing you your future. But leaving feels impossible, so you stay, and you stay poor. These patterns aren't moral failures. They're the predictable result of psychological tendencies interacting with modern economic environment. But they're also choices. You can recognize the patterns, you can change the behaviors, or you can spend the next 20 years practicing the same mistakes and wondering why your circumstances never improve. Let me show you what $25,000 actually means in mathematical terms, because until you see these numbers, the threshold remains abstract. Start with zero. You earn $65,000 annually. After taxes and mandatory deductions, you take home $4,000 monthly. You cut spending by $600 monthly through eliminating waste, the subscription services you don't use, the convenience spending that adds nothing to your life, the restaurant meals that could be home cooked. That $600 monthly is $7,200 annually. At 7% average annual return, here's what happens. Year one, you deposit $7,200. Market returns 7%. End balance $7,704. Year two, you deposit another $7,200. Your capital is now $14,904. Market returns 7%. End balance, $15,947. Year 3, another $7,200. Capital is $23,147. Market return 7%. End balance, $24,767. You're basically there. One more quarter and you cross $25,000. 3 years and 3 months from 0 to $25,000 by saving $600 monthly. But look at what happens next. You maintain the same $600 monthly discipline. Year 4, your capital is $25,000. You add $7,200. Capital is $32,200. Market return 7%. End balance $34,454. Year 5, add $7,200. Capital is $41,654. Market return 7%. End balance $44,570. Notice something? The first $25,000 took 3 years. The next $20,000 took 2 years. Same savings rate, same returns, accelerating accumulation. Year 10, you'd have $99,132. You're 4 months from $100,000. Year 15, $176,492. Year 20, $286,968. You started with nothing at age 47. You saved $600 monthly. Nothing heroic, nothing requiring extreme income or inheritance or lucky breaks. And you reached $287,000 by age 67. That's enough capital generating returns that you can reduce your work or stop entirely if you live modestly. But here's the comparison that matters. Your colleagues started at the same time, same income, same age, but they only saved $300 monthly, half your rate. Let's run their numbers. Year 3, they've got $11,727. They're not even halfway to $25,000. Year 10, $49,144. Half your balance. Year 20, $142,861. Half your final number. You save $300 more per month. That's $3,600 more annually. Over 20 years, you deposited $72,000 more than they did, but you ended up with $144,000 more than they did. The $72,000 extra deposits produced $144,000 extra ending balance because compound interest amplified your additional contributions. This is what people don't understand about compound interest. It's not magic, it's mathematics. But the mathematics are exponential, not linear. The early money compounds longer. The later contributions compound on top of the base that earlier contributions built. You're not just adding money. You're adding money to a growing pile that itself grows. Now let me show you the cost of interruption. You reach $50,000 at year 7. You've been disciplined. Then your kitchen needs renovation. You spend $30,000. Your balance drops to $20,000. You lost 7 years of progress in one decision. You restart your $600 monthly contributions. How long until you reach the balance you would have had if you'd left the $50,000 alone? At year 14, 7 years later, you'd have had $136,000 if you'd never touched the $50,000. Instead, you got $97,000. You're behind by $39,000. The $30,000 renovation cost you $39,000 in final wealth because you interrupted compounding. That's a $69,000 kitchen renovation. You spent $30,000 and gave up $39,000 in future value. This is opportunity cost. This is why you don't rate investment capital for consumption. Here's another brutal reality. Sequence of returns risk. You reach $25,000. Then the market crashes 30%. Your $25,000 is now $17,500. You panic, you sell. You just locked in the loss permanently. Your colleague also had $25,000. The market crashed. She stayed invested. She kept contributing $600 monthly. For 2 years, she bought shares at depressed prices. Then the market recovered. Her $25,000 became $32,500. Plus, she accumulated another $14,400 during the 2-year downturn, which she bought at discount prices. Her position is now worth $54,000 after the recovery. You sold at $17,500. You sat in cash during the recovery because you were scared. You finally bought back in after the market recovered. You've got $19,000. She's got $54,000. You've got $19,000. Same starting point, same crash, completely different outcomes. The difference? She understood that volatility is opportunity for disciplined investors. You converted temporary paper losses into permanent realized losses. Let me tell you about Charlie Munger, because everything I'm explaining comes from watching him for 70 years. Charlie started with nothing. He grew up during the Depression. His father was a lawyer in Omaha, earning $300 monthly when having a job at all was victory. Charlie learned early that security wasn't given, it was built. He went to war. He came back. He went to law school. He started practicing. He got married. By his late 20s, he was earning decent money for a young lawyer. Then his life exploded. His wife divorced him. Divorce meant splitting assets. He lost most of what he'd accumulated. He was starting over at 29. He remarried. He had a son, Teddy. The boy developed leukemia at age 8. Charlie didn't have health insurance. The medical bills destroyed him financially. He'd sit in the hospital watching his son die while calculating the cost of every treatment. Teddy died just before his 10th birthday. Charlie was 31, broke, burying his child. Most men would have been finished. Charlie got mean about money. Not greedy, mean. He decided he would never be vulnerable like that again. He would accumulate capital so that if catastrophe struck, he'd have resources to fight back. He practiced law during the day. He invested on the side. He lived modestly, kept the same house for 70 years, drove unremarkable cars, didn't inflate his lifestyle as his wealth grew. Every dollar that didn't go to necessities went to capital accumulation. By 38, he'd saved approximately $300,000 in today's money. That's roughly 10 years of family living expenses. He calculated he could quit practicing law and focus entirely on investing. He had enough capital that it would support him while he built Munger, Toles, and Olson as a law firm that didn't require his daily presence. And later, when he partnered with Warren Buffett to build Berkshire Hathaway. 300,000 was his freedom number. That's where he stopped being a wage earner and became a capital allocator. That's where his money started working harder than he could work. But notice the path. Catastrophic setbacks at 29 and 31. You're not going to be that person. Not because you're smarter or tougher, because you understand the psychology and mathematics, and you've built systems that protect you from predictable stupidity. $25,000 is a wall. Most people never climb it. You will, not through extraordinary effort, through ordinary discipline maintained across sufficient time. That's the only secret. There is no other secret. Start today, not Monday, not next month, today. Calculate spending, eliminate waste, establish automatic transfer. Every day you delay, you're choosing to stay on the wrong side of this line. 3 years from now, you'll have $25,000 and a completely different relationship with money, work, and freedom. Or you'll have nothing and 3 years of explanations about why circumstances prevented you from doing what was always possible. The mathematics don't care about your explanations. Neither does your future.